Warm greetings and Happy New Year. Happy New Year to all of us. And it's good to be back on the African Leadership Group, the Nigerian Leadership Series. My name is Itwa Igodalo. I'd like to think we all had a very, very good Christmas and a brilliant and wonderful New Year. I'm happy to welcome all of us back. And of course, today we're going to be debating something very, very, very interesting and very engaging, especially in the Nigerian political and leadership space. So if you were in church, I would have said to you, please turn to the person to the right and the person to your left and wish them a happy new year. But nonetheless, I'm sure that whoever is to your right or to your left in front of you there, you can wish them well. Let me first of all start by thanking everyone who did remarkably well last year. It was a busy year. We ran around a lot, doing this and that, achieved quite a lot. So let me thank the back office for doing a phenomenal job and keeping us on here constantly, regularly, 365 days and 52 weeks a year. That was really something. And I want to thank all those who stood in the gap for me, my colleagues, in presenting this program. Pastor Sonny Enebi, based out there in Ireland, and also Jumoke Akintaylor, based in California. And of course, Shade Fasidemi and Pastor Tayo, and of course, Oluwole Victor and Faye Ransom Otaji, and of course, Sister Lara Guruji. I want to thank everyone for all the fantastic things they did. 2023 report was given last year. I'm sure we're going to put a copy on the website and distribute it to all the ALG members. If my voice is a little bit slow and relaxed and sluggish, it's because I'm conserving it for different reasons. So please bear with me. I'm just taking things a bit easy before we go into the grind of the new year. We have some plans for 2024. We really need to get ALG really tricking and working and powering itself into what we need to do. We have about 3 or 4 critical focus areas that we're really looking at and working on. The community engagement project must start this year. And Undo and I have been looking at various ways of putting it together, making it happen. I think we went somewhere recently and somebody there was engaging the public. I think it was the KBAC or so, engaging his community, discussing with them, working things out. And I turned to him and I said, this is part of what we want to do, working through the KBACs, working through various leaders to engage them and get them to begin to do community things and community-based responses. I said on an interview in the new year that Nigerians need to begin to help themselves. They need to begin to build their own roads, build their own schools, lay their own pipes, carry their own trash, begin to community come together to help themselves to transform their various communities, okay? One of my friends just became an Oba, and he's really going out there to see how he can transform his community by himself. So that community engagement, very, very important. We must start it this year, and it will be part of our structure, a critical part of our structure. Hopefully this year we're going to have a constitution. Even going to review what kind of governance is best suited for Nigeria. Should we go back to the parliamentary system, or should we continue with this presidential system? And if we're going to go back to the parliamentary system, how are we going to do it? How are we going to make it happen? What do we need to do? Who do we need to engage? All I know is that the cost of politics must be substantially reduced in Nigeria. We must reduce the cost of politics and the cost of politicking. All right, so we're going to do that. We're going to encourage participation in political office for people who are interested in getting involved in politics. In fact, I think it's a sine qua non now. Sine qua non. Everybody must. It's critical because if we don't have the right people in our political space, we're just going to be begging the question. And if you don't get involved in the political space, you will never quite understand the way Nigeria is being managed and the thoughts going on. So I'd like to encourage everybody, and we're going to actively do that on the ALG. Okay. Today we're looking at a review of our budget. We're looking at a review of our budget. But before that, the other area that we need to look at ALG is the interaction with the diaspora, getting the diaspora engaged, getting them involved in Nigeria. And we have worked something critically out for that. Then we're going to be a very successful one over Christmas last year in Nigeria. And so we're going to continue with those interventions. It might be feeding, it might be scholarships, it might be boreholes, it might be rural electricity, and so on and so forth. That program of interventions will also continue. Those are the key areas that we want to look at in ALG, in the Nigeria Leadership Series. And then we're also going to continue, of course, with our interactions on a regular basis on this platform. Somebody was asking me today that are we able to measure the impact of this platform on the people who know about it or who attend? So we must work out from back office a way of measuring impact and seeing the relevance of what we're doing to the space. But along the line, somebody's also come to me and says, I want to do this same sort of thing this time around on a state level. I want to do an ALG on a state level and discuss ways of improving the state. So we're going to welcome partnerships and engagements like that to see how we can further spread the gospel. And as I said, very soon we'll have the Leadership Series Sierra Leone, Leadership Series South Africa, Leadership Series Botswana, Kenya, and so on and so forth. All right, so we're looking today at the Nigerian budget. The Nigerian budget. In November 29th, 2023, the President and Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Nigeria, Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu, presented the budget to the National Assembly and also came up with his appropriation bill and with the highlights of the biggest budget ever, 27.5 trillion, highest in the history of Nigeria, 10.9% higher than 2023 budget that was at 24.83 billion. Again, what I noticed and think was quite interesting is that it was tweaked or restructured in a very interesting way. Capital expenditure this time around was 31.6%, recurrent 36.1%, debt servicing was 30%. I think this was very good because it was down. It was an improvement from last year. Okay, others were 2.2%. You know, in the past, debt service was about 73% of revenue in the budget, but now it's down to about 45% of revenue, which I think it's a fantastic thing. And I like the fact that capital expenditure has increased by 34%. So there should be a big challenge to reflating the economy and having the government really spend a bit more in developing things. The defense and energy sector has the largest share this year of 12%, education 7.9%, health 5%, infrastructure 5%, social investment 5%. Though they're still a little bit below the international best practice, where health and education should be about 15%, and education should be about 15 to 20%, according to the UNESCO standards. But again, this is an improvement from previous years, and it's quite encouraging. All I hope and I believe is that the government will stay faithful to this course, will stay faithful and sincere, and will really, really reduce this big elephant in the room called corruption that seems to bite Nigeria from different spaces. Somebody was saying to me recently that there's so much foreign exchange in different hands in Nigeria that cannot come back into the economy because the owners of those monies cannot officially declare them. That one of the things that government can do is to find a way of getting these monies back into the system, and it might surprisingly help our foreign exchange situation in Nigeria. So we want to look at today's the budget. We want it to be reviewed and analyzed. We have two very distinguished speakers here, and what we're going to do today is to give them time to do their own analysis of the budget, their own thinking, and then we'll ask a few questions and then get them to make their to get them to respond to those questions. That's the way we want to go very quickly today. Our first presenter today is Dr. Muda Yusuf, who was the immediate past Director General of the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, an economist that has contributed immensely to the national economic discourse through his research-based analysis of government as they affect various sectors of the economy. He's currently the founder CEO of the Center for the Promotion of Private Enterprise, an NGO committed to the ideals of free enterprise and private sector development. Our second presenter, discussant today, is Oluseun Onigbide, the co-founder and director of Budget Nigeria's civic organization. Oluseun is a recipient of the Ashaka Fellowship, the Future Africa Awards, Quartz Africa 30 Innovators Award, Aspen New Voices Fellowship, Melvin Jones Fellowship, Standard Draper Hill Summer Fellowship. As a Knight Innovation Fellow, you also work with the International Center for Journalists, the Gates Foundation on rethinking health journalism in Nigeria. He has worked on several projects funded by the MacArthur Foundation, Gates Foundation, Ford Foundation, Open Society Foundation, Oxfam, and Omidyar Network. We thank you and we bless God for your life. Before we ask them to make their presentations very quickly, I'd like to play this very short but instructive video of the situation in one of Nigeria's rural areas. Please watch, and then we quickly have the presentation. Once again, Happy New Year.
Terrible.
I think we'll play that video again because I think somehow it started right there in the middle. It's the story of what is happening in some rural area of Nigeria. The lady there is trying to cross a little stream. That's the bridge. She falls. She falls. And that community has a senator, the community has a member of House of Rep, the community probably has a local government chairman, and this is what people have to resort to get from one place to the other. What really is the challenge of governance in Nigeria, and will our budget for this year really approach questions like this? Let me welcome Dr. Muda to make his, Dr. Muda Yusuf to make his presentation if he's ready. Thank you very much, everyone, and have a very wonderful evening.
Thank you very much, Pastor Itwa. It's a great pleasure to be part of this conversation. I've been told I have about maybe 10 minutes or so, and I have quite a number of slides, so I see how...
I think so, and if we could see your beautiful face, sir, we will be happy.
Okay. Okay. So I will rush through it because I'm told this the focus should be more on the interactive side of the program. So let me quickly share the slides, if you don't mind. Well, the presentation outline is as follows. Of course, I don't have the time to go through all of this. We have, of course, the budget objectives. We have the assumptions. We have the fiscal framework. We have the budget numbers, that's looking at the expenditure and the revenue estimates. We have the 2023 budget performance, sectoral allocations. We have the role of the subnationals, which also relates to what Pastor just said about what the subnationals are bringing to the table when we have budget conversations. We have the business implications of the budget, because the conversation around the budget is not just about the budget itself. It's also good to look at the implications of the budget for business. Debt sustainability, business resilience strategies, how exactly should businesses design their strategy to cope with the current economic turbulence. Forex and risk sector outlook. Then the risks to the economy, and what I call the silver lining, even in the current crisis. The objectives are as outlined by the president: job creation, macroeconomic stability, and so on. We don't have the time to go through all of this, but those are the objectives. Then the assumptions: we have inflation rates 21.4%, oil production 1.78 million barrels per day, oil price $77.98 per barrel, GDP growth 3.88, exchange rate 800. If you look closely at the assumptions, first we feel that some of these assumptions are rather optimistic, because as we speak, December inflation is at 28.9%. Food inflation is at 34%. And the budget assumption is at 21.4%. I'm not saying it's not realizing, but it's a tall order. Key inflation drivers remain the exchange rate depreciation, high energy prices, high transportation costs. Those problems are still there. So to the extent that we're able to deal with some of those problems, perhaps we could see a moderation in inflation. You could also see a moderation as a result of possible base effects in the inflation computation. The increased domestic production of petroleum products, if we're able to make much progress in the domestic refining of petroleum products, we expect that energy prices may come down, and energy prices is also a major driver of inflation. Then the commitment of the central bank to comply strictly with the CBN Act with respect to ways and means financing or the federal government expenditure may also have a moderating effect on inflation. Because the ways and means financing as at the end of May was about 30 trillion naira. And it has such very profound impact on money supply, on liquidity, on inflation and exchange rate depreciation. Oil production at 1.78 million barrels per day. That's quite optimistic, given the fact that we are doing at best for now around 1.2, 1.3, maybe at best 1.4. And we are still grappling with the challenges around, the criminality and all the problems in the oil producing areas. But maybe if we're able to make progress with the current onslaught on crude oil theft, perhaps we may be getting close to that. But the reality is that it's a bit optimistic. Then we also expect that the Petroleum Industry Act, which is a major policy reform for the oil and gas sector, is also likely to, have a positive effect on investment in the sector, perhaps in the medium term. Oil price assumption of $77.98 per barrel. This is clearly very optimistic, because the practice normally is to give a headroom of about $5 or more between the current price and budget assumption. But here we are, current price is around 78. The current the price assumption for the crude oil is also about 78. So there is no headroom at all. So there is no room to accommodate any volatility in terms of oil price. Growth rate 3.76% is not bad, especially if you look at it against the background of other projections. The World Bank projected 3.3, African Development Bank projected 3.3, Fitch projected 2.9, UN projected 3.1, IMF projected 3%. So it's not completely way out of other projects. So I believe that it is realizable if we do the right things, investment climate, and we sustain current reforms. These are just assumptions, the macroeconomic something, so we don't need to go through all of this. This is overview of the fiscal framework 2024 to 2026. The expenditure outlook, again, a bit ambitious. The capital expenditure is moving from 5.97 trillion in 2023 to 9.99 trillion in 2024. That's an increase of 67%. That, of course, is remarkable. I mean, if we can achieve that. Non-debt recurrent expenditure is also increased by 5%. Debt service is increased by 26%. Debt service in 2023 was 6.56. In 2024, is 8.28 trillion. It's an increase of 26%. Statutory transfers is increasing by 79%. Total expenditure increased by 32%. In 2023, it was 21.83. This year is 28.77. And the interesting thing is that we are seeing a reduction in deficit. In 2023, it was 11.34 trillion. In 2024, it's 9.18 trillion, which is good, which shows that something positive is happening around the growth of government revenue. Some interesting issues again here is the fact that capital expenditure exceeds recurrent non-debt expenditure for the first time in many years. What we have seen over the years is the fact that recurrent non-debt exceeds capital expenditure. But for this year, we are seeing a slight change, which is something that is commendable. But the question remains, what percentage of infrastructure spending is in this capital expenditure? Because if you look at the breakdown of the capital items, sometimes you find things like computers, like furniture, vehicles, and all of that. So that distorts the whole expectation about the fact that you have a bigger number around the capital expenditure. The pastor just referred to the SUVs, 160 million naira per legislature. That will also come under capital expenditure. So we need to, interrogate that, disaggregate it to actually know what is actually coming to infrastructure. Because that is the only way the budget can have some meaningful impact in terms of creating the environment for productivity. Debt service continues to grow. Of course, there's a reduction in the deficit. Now, the revenue situation is even more interesting. In 2023, we are seeing a growth of 313% in growth of oil revenue. Oil revenue in 2023 was 2.23. 2024 is 9.21 trillion. Independent revenue is also growing by 18%. Non-oil taxes is also growing by 87%. This is quite remarkable. And of course, it has a whole lot of implications. We feel that the oil revenue projection is, although ambitious, but however, a lot of revenue is coming from fuel subsidy removal, expected increase in crude oil output on the back of the efforts to curb crude oil theft, and maybe the impact of the PIA on investment in the sector. But again, it's a bit ambitious, over 300% increase. exchange rate, I mean, the budget. Now, of course, it's on the face of it. You can say we have a very big budget. But if we discount for inflation and look at the real numbers, actually the budget has actually not grown as such. If you look at the dollar equivalent of the budget between 2020 to 2024, in 2020, the dollar equivalent was 30 billion. In 2021, it was 35.5 billion. In 2022, it was 42 billion. In 2023, it was 47 billion. Now it is 35.9 billion. That's even using the official exchange rate. If you use the rate of 1,200 to the dollar, you are talking about just about 24 billion US dollars. So we need to manage expectations as far as these numbers are concerned. The figures are not as big as they appear in terms of the value. And in any case, out of the 28 trillion, 8 trillion is for debt service. So the amount that's actually available for spending is actually 20 trillion naira. Well, these are some of the projections for the performance of what we had in 2023. I don't think we have time to go through that. But what is instructive here is that for the first time, the actual revenue exceeded the budgeted revenue. I mean, that again, we have to commend. Of course, again, it shows that the fiscal space is improving. And the company income tax increased by 121% as of September last year. That again is something that we should applaud. Then the education tax, that's the TES fund, increased by 223% in terms of revenue. So there are some positive indicators as far as revenue growth is concerned. But how we expend the revenue, I think, is another matter entirely. In terms of expenditure, what strikes me in terms of expenditure in 2023 was the shortfall of 75% in capital expenditure. You know, when you look at the budget against actual, as of September, there's a shortfall of 75%. So practically all the money that we have spent have gone into debt service and overhead and personnel costs. This is the figure as of September as presented by the minister. Well, this is what I just narrated. Company tax exceeded budget by 121%, tertiary education tax, independence revenue, and so on. Expenditure performance, exactly what I just mentioned now. In critical allocations, we can see that education had a 7.9%, health had 5% in budget. Defense and security understandably has the highest allocation of 12%. But again, none of this, most times when we have conversations around the budget, we don't focus on the subnationals. And I think that's a missing link in most of the conversations around the budget. All the focus is almost entirely on the federal government. We talk of health, we talk of education, we talk of rural roads and infrastructure. The states have a lot of role to play, and even including the local governments. Because if you look at the federal allocation of revenue allocation, about 48% goes to both states and local governments put together. And on top of that, some of the states have the oil additional revenue from derivation, the oil producing states. And some states are also doing fairly well in terms of internally generated revenue. But we hardly interrogate that. Now, the pastor just showed us a video. Some of these things are something that ought to normally have been dealt with either by the local government or the state governments. But each time we have this conversation, we're always focusing on the federal. So we need to have a more inclusive interrogation of the entire budget process. Sustainability is a big issue. Domestic debt is 64%. External debt is 36%. That is fairly comforting that we don't have too much of external debt. But at the same time, 89 trillion in terms of debt is very huge. By the time we add the 7.3 trillion securitization, which the president just got from the National Assembly, our total debt will be going to 94 trillion naira. Servicing those debts is going to be quite a tall order. So we may exceed what we have even budgeted for debt service in the current year. Then in terms of external debt, Again, it's a bit comforting that multilateral debt is 50%, bilateral is 13%. Between the bilateral and multilateral, they are generally more concessionary than the commercial debt, which is essentially the Eurobond. As business implications of the budget, well, for as businesses, we have two major interests in the budget. First is the appropriation. As businesses, we have services to offer. Some of us are contractors, service providers. We need to follow the money. We need to look at the details and see where the opportunities are to provide service for government. And I think we should not have any apologies about that. The second is the opportunity that it creates for private sector in terms of being involved within the framework of the public-private partnership. The third is the issue of policy. Policy has a lot to do with what the private sector can do in any fiscal year. This year, we haven't been told whether we are going to have the Finance Act or not, because normally the Finance Act is the policy content of the budget. That nobody has said anything about that because it contains issues of fiscal policy amendments and issue of tax amendment. Of course, we also should expect some pressure because the government is very bullish about revenue. So that may put some pressure on businesses generally. So practically all the MDAs are under pressure now to go and source what they call internally generated revenue. And a lot of them have been given some ambitious targets, even for those of them that are not even revenue generating institutions. And for each of them that interface with the private sector, it's a lot of pressure on businesses. Business resilience strategies, yeah, the challenges are there, but we cannot keep lamenting. We should have our own strategy of surviving as a business while we engage the government at a macro level. So our business model has to be flexible and nimble. We need to embrace innovation. We need to hedge against volatility in some of these macroeconomic variables, especially interest rate and exchange rates. We need to leverage technology. We need to collaborate and have partnerships. We need to deepen our customer focus. We need to manage our costs. Cost containment is extremely very important. We need to minimize foreign exchange exposure because we have seen what the volatility in forex has done to many businesses, including even multinationals. The exposure to foreign exchange has done a lot of damage to their balance sheet. We also need to minimize the exposure to debt, bank credit, because interest rate risk is extremely high. We also need to incorporate cost-effective energy solutions. Energy cost is one of the biggest problems we are dealing with as business entities. So we need to come up with more cost-effective energy solutions, energy efficiency. We also need to have what I call scenario planning. It's a very volatile environment, so it's good to have a scenario approach to our planning. What happens if exchange rate moves either way? What happens if interest rates move either way? All those issues are very important. Then stakeholder engagement is also very important. So, Pastor, I think I've exceeded my time. So I think let me just stop here so that Seun can do the rest of the presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Muda. We are glad you could join us today. Pastor is having network issues, but he will join us very shortly. Mr. Seun, please go ahead with your presentation.
Oh, can you hear me clearly? Please, if you can, let me know.
Yes, we can hear and see you. Thank you.
Okay, cool. So thank you so much. With a great presentation already, even Dr. Muda Yusuf, I'm being careful so that I don't regurgitate the things he has said, because I also wanted to come from the heavy numbers, but I would sidestep that a bit, while I will lay more on the issues, on the fundamental issues with the budget, so that we can have a well-rounded conversation. We are a civil society organization, so permit me, if Dr. Muda Yusuf is looking from an opportunity perspective at macro level, we are looking at the fundamental issues that plagues the Nigerian budget. Now, we'll share a small presentation, even though I know it's not exhaustive of the issues, and I will speak to some as we go along the way. The first challenge we have in the budget is that we believe in budget that the Nigerian budget is very, very small. It's a $34 billion budget for the federal government. Still trying to find my screen. It's a $34 billion budget. I'm trying to find the share button. Right. Okay, I can't find the share button, but we'll just continue. It's a $34 billion budget, 28 trillion naira budget now. The president presented 27 trillion. And at the end of the day,
if you want, you can send it to me, Shewa, and I can share it for you if you would prefer. You can email, you can send it to me via WhatsApp.
Okay, I can do that. I will try and do that. But I will just run through. Maybe I will share later so I don't stop the flow. Okay. Someone has to mute.
Yeah, I've muted him. Apologies for that.
No problem. So I will talk about 10 issues about the Nigerian budget, just 10 issues, and I'll take them step by step. The first issue is the issue of the government-owned enterprises. In the Nigerian budget, apart from the mainstream budget that we have the MDAs, which are the ministry, department, and agencies, there are those we call the government-owned enterprises, and they are not small in number. These are 63 government-owned enterprises. These are agencies that are supposed to raise their own revenue, run their own expenditure, and remit either dividends, benefits, or profits to the Nigerian government. Their combined budget was 4.93 trillion. Interestingly, budget made a strong advocacy that these agencies should present their budgets to the public. And when the proposed budget was made, and this is the first time that we are seeing a whole lot of budget of the GOEs. So it's something that needs to be paid attention to. Because for years, Nigeria has paid attention to VAT, CIT, customs revenues, but the monies that these government-owned enterprises make, a significant chunk has to also come to the federal coffers. Recently, a circular came at the beginning of this year that the federal government is mandating that any amount that hits the federal government account, 50% for this GOEs, 50% of that money has to be moved to the federal government's purse. So that is something that we are watching in a significant way. The second problem with the Nigerian budget we see as an issue is the ambitious levels of the revenue projections. And Dr. Yusuf has mentioned that. We are projecting around an 19 trillion naira budget in this current budget, 19 trillion naira revenue. In 2022, Nigeria's revenue was around 6 trillion naira. And even if you make a lot of adjustment in what should qualify as a revenue term in budgets internally, we don't think that revenue was more than 4.5 trillion naira. Now, the federal government has gained some benefits because of devaluation of currencies and all of that. But some basic assumptions are not changing. We're not producing oil as we should be produced. In the last 3 years, our oil production dipped as low as 800,000 per barrel. Recent figures for December put us at 1.3 million per barrel, when we have an OPEC quota of around 1.8 million per barrel. So there's still a challenge in terms of optimizing revenue on that side. And there have been some tremendous impact on CIT and the VAT, but some of them are also due to currency repricing and the devaluation. So, but revenue projection to say we're going to move from around 6 to 8 trillion naira to 19 trillion naira in a single year is something that is highly ambitious. The third thing is that there are also agencies or payments we call service-wide votes in the budget. So these are not amounts that are tied to MDAs, like ministries, agencies. For example, service-wide votes are like payments for ex-leaders, payments for militants. Sometimes you see things like SDG projects. Now, the service-wide votes is under the control of the Ministry of Finance, and different agencies plug into it. Now, the challenge is that because an agency is, you can in a difficult manner find who is responsible for that project. It's become a slush fund. In fact, service-wide vote that were around 757 billion in 2018 has risen to 4.4 trillion in 2024. So you have a bucket of fund that have no detail, that has no breakdown. That, for example, you will see special projects 1.8 billion naira. That becomes a challenge, even how as a non-profit organization we're able to capture it. So that's our third issue. We also have a problem with the budget not being drawn from a plan. And I think that's the basic reason why we budget so much and we see tangible effect. Because Nigerian government has relinquished the budget to the hands of bureaucrats, MD budget masters. So everybody has turned the budget to an extension of their interest. In fact, 2024 approved budget, the preliminary document that we have seen, because the official document has not been posted on the budget office website, shows that different constituencies posted different items in the budget. Before, there was a constituency budget for 100 billion naira. Or that lawmakers are able to put whatever they like for their constituency. But now, the Buhari regime, I know we're in a church environment, so I'm being careful with my adjectives. The Buhari regime had a very lax attitude to insertion of items in the budget. So what we have right now is that the budget is just an haphazard arrangement of items planned to be procured. There is nothing that you see in the budget that says Ministry of Health, Ministry of Education, Ministry of Power as planned, and this is our agenda, and we are putting line items that fit into that plan. And that takes me to our next point, which is my fifth point, about the fact that you now see agencies that have no scope delivering projects. So in the 2024 budget, that has not changed. So you see a school in the East, a Federal Cooperative College, or G River, maybe it's in Enugu and Anambra, and that agency is constructing a road in Surulere. You see a Nigerian Roads Research Institute, NBRI, it's an institute that should be a roads research institute, has nothing to do with building road, researching maybe soil texture, doing material science. That's what they're supposed to deliver. But they have a 50 billion naira budget to build roads. So we now have agencies delivering things outside their scope in an overpriced manner, and has not made the budget as efficient, as it should be. The other challenge is also the replication of items in the supplementary budget. So we had, let's not forget that in the previous supplementary budget, some items were there like renovation of the presidential quarters, renovation of the presidential quarters in Lagos. Those same items we still found them in the 2024 budget. Now we are wondering, why do you have something in the supplementary budget? Why do you have something in the approved budget? And we have also now have an haphazard budget regime. So we have a 2023 budget still being operational now till March this year. We have a supplementary budget that was passed late last year. Then we still have a 2024 budget that has been approved January this year. So we're technically running three budgets concurrently, and which definitely puts us in the basket of what exactly things should be. I think I will stop at this point and I'll be able to take your question. I wanted to situate on the issues that the Nigerian budget is more like a contract vending document. It's the challenges that dog it. It's not just about how much revenue we can earn. It's also about that we have not made this document a planning document, either for a short term, a medium term, or a long term purpose. And because of that, we just put items in the budget, and which is also something that Dr. Yusuf talked about, laptops, computers, different things, administrative capital, software, consultancies, different items in the budget that has nothing to do with the people, or that has sometimes have nothing to do with the mandate of the agency that is meant to be. And that's why, in some sort of way, it's still grossly inefficient. It does not drive our development as it should be, and it might not even change our story in the short term. I think I will stop at that point. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Pastor Ito is back on.
Well, I am, but you can continue. I thought you wanted to come up with a set of questions for them.
Thank you, Cheryl. I think for me, I'm so glad that you were able to identify like 5 areas of the challenges that we have with this budget. And so, but in identifying those challenges, I think you also have recommendations going forward. Like if we had the ears of the presidency or the budget office, what would be those recommendations based on those 5 items that you have, those 5 challenges that you have identified? You're muted. You're muted.
I said 2 days ago, we met the Minister of Budget and National Planning, Alhaji Atiku Bagudu. Met him in Abuja, my team, myself, and our country director. And we laid all these issues to him. And my understanding that he's aware fully of these issues. It's clear to him that these issues exist. That we're talking about agencies doing things outside their mandate. But what he said was that it's a process. Because the first problem we have 3 problems with the Nigerian budget. That fundamentals, the power of appropriation, what is the limit of the National Assembly powers when it comes to budgeting issues. There was a time we tried to take that, the executive took that case to the Supreme Court. They were supposed to get a pronouncement and they retreated, and we are tending towards the US style, where the president's proposal, in the US, the president's proposal is just a proposal. At the end of the day, what gets passed is what the Congress determines should be passed. So the Congress in the US owns the budget. They are the ones and that's why there's a Congressional Budget Office that sets the standards. But there are some basic fundamentals, even if the Congress is the one adjusting the budget, there's some fundamentals that they are agreed upon. The challenge is the National Assembly, how wide should our powers be? So that's the first challenge that we have to figure out a way to resolve in terms of recommendation, because it looks like the executive just wants to sign anything off. They are pressed for time and they are not pushing back as they should. And even if they push back, they have an understanding that the National Assembly can still use their veto power to override the executive and as well just pass the budget and move on. The second challenge is also undue influence of individuals in the budget process. I say, budget has an infographic, which I will put in the presentation that I will share, of the current chief of staff, Mr. Femi Gbajabiamila. And if you drive through Surulere, you assume that Surulere maybe does not have a Lagos state government presence or does not have even a local government presence, because almost every single street, every corner, you have a project that was nominated or facilitated by Mr. Gbajabiamila. And so that's what you're saying. And that's also something you will see. You will say in 2024, but National Assembly leaders, either the chairman of appropriations or either the leadership, like the Senate president or the House committee chair, are now beginning to appropriate more than necessary. So it's not even become like, maybe let me use the proper word, a shakedown. So we have to put something in my constituency before this budget can pass, in some sort of way. It's an abusive culture that is not going to fix any of our issues. And we are seeing that pattern. We've seen that pattern now with Ministry of Women Affairs, going to do something in Godswill Akpabio's constituency. So it's something that talk about our spending efficiency. So there has to be a presidential assembly convened to set limits about what do they do to those appropriations power. Where does this stop? And I think the other point is efficiency of the GOEs. We want to see where the 50% leads us, because that's a step forward. Before, the Fiscal Responsibility Act says you are only supposed to remit 80% of your operating surplus. That's what the Fiscal Responsibility Act says. So what you get, an agency generates 5 billion naira, it spends 4.8 billion naira because it can spend 4.8 billion naira because it takes its budget to the National Assembly and they put 4.8 billion naira to it. He has a surplus of just 200 million naira, and he remits 80% of that, which is 60 million naira. Whereas that agency could have just spent 2 billion naira and remitted more. So we are also watching this 50% mandate that any income you get, the government is 50% of it. We'll see how that translates to go along the way.
Okay, thank you very much. Those are very, very insightful things. I'm going to just carry on from there and ask you one more question before I start to ask Dr. Yusuf some specifics about some of the numbers that he rolled out. So is there any hope, and how do you see this going? So question number one, what kind of impact do you think this budget is going to now make on our economy, on our growth, on our people as a nation, and what is the trickle-down effect it is going to have to the common man. And then the way by which the budgets have been drawn, the power of appropriation, a shakedown budget, a negotiation, a way of something for the boys, and so on and so forth, without any real planning. What else can we do? How can we change this way and method of doing things in Nigeria and do things in a way that we can actually get value out of the whole process?
Thank you so much about what we can do. There is hope in the budget. I think the small glimmer of hope, the current government is that there's a bit of attention to the macroeconomic fundamentals compared to the previous government. So the previous government believed that they could print their way. They do not have to do any level of fiscal rationalization, consolidation. And because of that, because they want to do things and they found a pliable CBN, and they were able to do things. And we also saw how that led to inflationary effect and the devaluation of the currency. I mean, you put 23 trillion naira in an economy without any form of asset being backed by it, is going to have some form of implication in the economy. I think this current government understands that. And that's why they want, and that's why we're watching their approach. And that's why Dr. Yusuf said they will be aggressive with revenue mobilization. Because this is not a government that has seen the effects, because at the end of the day, if you keep piling on the inflation, let's not forget the cost of contracting will also keep increasing. They were supposed to build this road for 200 billion naira, and there's inflation at the geometric scale that we are going right now. That road becomes 300 billion naira. So it's not like as if you are benefiting anything, you're losing in the end. So I think that's the silver hope. The other part is also look at education and health. Compared to previous times, there's been more allocation given to those agencies, and I think more attention needs to be paid into what is happening in there. I also think there's a whole lot of funding for renewable energy. There's too many projects around solar projects in the budget, which shows that while we wait for the Siemens deal and the other macro grid projects, we will still have to make do to activate mini grids and solar projects and captive power and all of that. And I think those are and defense, definitely. A lot of defense spending as it should. The challenges is that all of these whole budgets, even if we make 100%, doesn't meet the scale of our issues. One of the big things you see in the budget is a lot of fragmentation of project items. We can check the budget, you see a lot of 10 million naira, 20 million naira project here and there. There's a video clip of where someone was questioning the Minister of Works where he allocated 20 million naira to a capital project in Benin. And I'm like, what exactly is 20 million naira going? So you have the Ministry of Works has over 800 capital projects, a whole lot, and there's no way you're going to implement that. The only way we can keep is to continuously use different pressure groups to dialogue with government on this issue. Civil society will do its part. I know ICANN has also started some engagement. The church can also start some engagement to be able to engage government. And these are fundamentals that would not make us move forward. And the things that we need to itemize them and engage. Because if it seems budgets keep saying these things and keep saying it, everybody, it feels boring. Well, like I said, we met the Minister of Budget and Planning, and he understood the issues. He's open to make some of the changes, and that maybe by the time we look at the 2025 budget, things will significantly improve. And I think I will just leave it at that, sir. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Dr. Yusuf, I have a couple of questions for you. You did put in your presentation.
Can I just comment briefly on some of the things that he said?
Okay, go ahead.
First, on this, because there's something peculiar about our democracy. For the average citizen, the understanding of the value that their representatives bring to the community is not the quality of his contributions on the floor of the assembly. It's not about how much loss that he makes. It's not about the quality of oversight. It's about what they can see physically. I take the example of my village. you had a House of Representatives member. As far as the village people were concerned, the only thing that they see that he has done was about 6 boreholes that he was able to bring to the village, because the village has serious problem with water. The states were not doing anything. The local government was not doing anything. Through this constituency project, he was able to bring that to the community. So again, this issue about constituency projects, we need to also look at the totality of our democratic model. Because the expectation from the community, from people who are legislators, it's not so much about it. In fact, they don't even know what debate is going on. What they want to see is something physical. So we need to see how we figure that out. Then the pastor said before now about this our model of democracy. Again, is it really working for us? If you ask me, I don't think it is working for us. We are not getting the right kind of value, and it's costing us so much. This is a challenge to our intellectuals, particularly those who are political science professors. We should come up with a model that is not just going to bring a model from the United States and just implant it on our own system. Then there is this issue of budgeting. I mean, Sheung talked about this fragmentation. Now you have a project. You allocate funds to the project that cannot complete the project. Sometimes the amount voted cannot even do almost 25% of the project. So because of that, you have all manner of abandoned projects here and there coming with all sorts of variations and all of that. So that approach, to budgeting, I think is something that we need to, whatever we allocate must be able to complete a project substantially to a particular level. I just think I should just make that comment.
All right, thank you. Those are very, very useful and engaging comments, and especially this one that you mentioned, that the way our people evaluate the performance of an assembly member is by community projects. And that really has, I think, in its own way, brought some dividends to some extent, but also brought a bit of graft, a lot of corruption. People are just throwing community projects at their communities, and sometimes those projects are not fit for community. It's just the guy who thinks he has an idea. So you find a lot of these community projects even being done that don't even bring value to the community. And after a while, after they've been press opened and all that, they are either not maintained or abandoned. Some boreholes, there's no generator to pump the water, blah, blah, blah. Everything becomes another double waste, and so on and so forth. But I also wanted to ask you a couple of questions. You did say that the budget is using 800 naira to the dollar for the budget, okay? You did also say that it's the rate of the barrel. There's no slack, there's no room, there's no headroom between the cost of the barrel of oil and what has been used in the budget, 77 to 78. But here we have the foreign exchange exchanging at about 1,200 naira to the dollar in the black market, and we're using 800 naira for our budget. Is there not some kind of subsidy there also, or are we being realistic in that thing? And then we are looking forward to local production of our refinery or local production of oil. We know Dangote has started, thankfully, but do we have any hope in our other refineries working and increasing the production of the supply of fuel? Maybe you want to take a bite at those two questions.
Yes, the foreign exchange assumption what normally happens is that if in the course of the year there's a difference between the budget rate and the actual rate, that's what you call the foreign exchange surplus, which is also recognized as additional revenue to government. So that is also part of the budgetary process. If we have more foreign exchange naira in terms of naira from the difference, that difference is something that is also recognized as the surplus from between what the budget has adopted and what actually is the rate. Because if you look at the rates now, the thing has been oscillating sometimes 900, getting to 1,000, and so on and so forth. I think the government has a framework of tracking this surplus so that at the end of the year, at least there is a report that shows foreign exchange surplus, which is also absorbed into the revenue. Secondly, we need to be careful the way we allow the official rate to change the parallel market rate. Yes, it's good to have a market-led economy, but we also need to also define the limits, because if you leave the naira completely, because that is the experience we have now seen. For some of us, the impact of the foreign exchange convergence so far, in fact, you can call it partial convergence now. We never imagined that the impact can be so profound on prices and on citizens and on so many things. So while it is good to pursue these market systems, we need to, I don't know, maybe there's something peculiar about our own economy that will not allow us to freely float the currency, but I think there is need for caution in terms of, using the parallel market as a benchmark for determining what the actual rate is, because the parallel market has a whole lot of variables that sometimes that you cannot explain, especially in an environment where there is so much corruption, in an environment where a lot of corrupt deals are done in dollars. So these things create a whole lot of distortions. So that is why I'm worried about using the parallel market rate as a benchmark. But so far, we have made some progress, at least in narrowing the gap between what happens in the parallel market and what happens in the official window. Then, concerning the domestic refining, well, it is good news that it's coming from the Dangote refinery, depending again on how much support the NNPC can provide in terms of making crude available to Dangote refinery. It's also a good news that Port Harcourt refinery is almost ready. And even more interesting is what the NNPC is talking about of not allowing the bureaucrats or politicians to manage the refineries. That gladdens my heart, because what has brought us to this point, to this mess, was the fact that we handed over a very critical sector to politicians and bureaucrats. And that is what ruined our oil and gas sector, which is supposed to be a major lever, for us to transform our economy, build our infrastructure, diversify the economy. But we messed it up because we handed it over to bureaucrats. So what the NNPC has proposed, getting private sector people to manage it, I hope they do it transparently and they get the right people. That, I'm sure, will go a long way in ensuring that you have something that is much more efficient and that will give us value. But to answer your question, domestic refining of petroleum products, I think, will have a very great positive impact because of the import substitution effect. Because the pressure that is putting on the foreign exchange market is a lot. So if you can domesticate that, localize that, then I believe that we should see some relief in terms of making fuel available and possibly even at a cheaper rate.
Yeah, let me throw you one more question, a couple of questions, and then maybe our speaker, Mr. Nigide, would want to add a few things there. You talked about the production of crude 1.7 million barrels per day. And you say that was a budget projection, but really we are at about 1.3, 1.4 million barrels a day. Are they going to be realistically able to increase the production of crude quickly? And what do they do? What should they do? What should government do to increase or maybe even surpass that daily production of crude? And then again, apart from just the production of crude, I was reading or listening to, I don't know whether it's the finance minister of Malaysia or some country that said that what they did in their country was to reduce or almost eliminate raw material export, but do value-added production and export more the finished goods, and that it jumpstarts or increased their revenue of their country by 400 or 4,000%, and turned their economy around and increased their budget. Give them a bigger budget and a bigger spend, increased employment in their country, reduced dependency on foreign exchange. In fact, it transformed the economy. Is somebody in Nigeria not thinking about that? And is this something that's doable within the Nigerian context? What do you think?
Well, concerning the possible increase in our oil output, of course, it is possible, but it's going to be a very, very challenging thing to do. Because, only recently we had a Shell had to sell off their onshore assets. Because for some reasons, we allow their oil producing area to become almost an ungoverned space where all manner of things were happening. Insecurity, theft, using vessels, and all of that. Unfortunately, we have lost vital investors in that area, the IOCs, who have the capacity to invest. They have the capacity to improve our output, but we didn't pay attention for over 10 years when things were degenerating. So we had the issue of the insecurity. We had the issue of policy. It took us almost 20 years to be able to get the Petroleum Industry Act. So that was what has led to this situation. Unfortunately, we are now in an era of decarbonization, transition fuel and all of that. So to get those investors back at that level is going to be a bit challenging. So it's possible it's going to be challenging. And even as we speak now, the problem of insecurity is still there. The problem of oil theft is still there, because these things have become deeply entrenched in all these areas. So it's going to be a tall order, in my view. It's a tall order. Then, in terms of value added, yes, this is about production. It's about adding value. But again, it depends on the environment we create to add the value. If you have an environment where adding value will make the product even more expensive and not competitive, then there's no way you can make any impact in the global market. That is the problem we have with our production. So unless we create the right environment that can make our production system much more competitive, then the theory of this value added, increasing our foreign exchange earnings exports, it will fly. But if the challenges remain the way they are, it's going to be extremely difficult. But the best prospect we have in that area is actually in oil and gas. We can do a lot. For me, I think it's a low-hanging fruit as far as breaking through in terms of adding value, because the resources are here. It's a resource-based industry. So it has better prospects of being globally competitive. So we can do a lot more in terms of this refining. If we had not left the refineries to the NNPC and to bureaucrats, by now we should have been exporting refined petroleum products, apart from meeting our own domestic demand. petrochemicals, fertilizers, gas. I mean, these things have actually leapfrogged the economy long time ago, but we mismanage the entire ecosystem. So that would be my response to it, Pastor.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Mr. Oluseun Onigbede, do you have anything to add or say to our economy? And really, what are the critical things that we need from this government to give the people confidence, trust, and belief that things are going to change or improve? What are really, I mean, if you were president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, which I'm sure you like to be, I just want to tell Bola Tinubu that that's your ambition, so that you don't get into trouble. But what would you do? What would you do to reflate our economy, to jumpstart our economy, to turn things around for Nigeria and to create a change? What do we need to do?
Okay, thank you so much, sir. I think first thing is fiscal discipline. The way, and I think a small barometer, by our own team to really understand if this government was serious or not serious was to look at the budget. Immediately we saw the budget, we formed our opinion that it seems it is the same business as usual. The government has not had a grip on its fiscal, because if you are even tightening things on the monetary side, which means you are liberalizing the FX market, you are trying to raise interest rates so that you can slow down, fund availability within the economy. But the fiscal side is spending, in an haphazard, in a reckless manner. You're not going to change anything. You're like you're fetching water in a basket. So there has to be fiscal discipline, to the teeth, where people will understand that at this time, government cannot continue to live recklessly and live without boundaries. That's number one. The second thing is productivity. There are some things that will not be fixed in Nigeria in the short run. And we have to live by that. If we are going to turn around our oil production metrics, it's not going to happen in 1 year or 2 years. It might take 3-4 years. For example, the news that Shell was selling its onshore business was up. And it's just a clear indication that our prognosis or our theory for onshore business due to theft, vandalism, and all the old community challenges means that a lot of people want to go offshore. And we know how expensive it is to put an offshore, a deep offshore platform down. And in this anti-hydrocarbon environment where people are talking about climate change and green energy, how are you going to easily even form that income? How are you going to be able to reach FID, the final investment destination? So there's but we have the onshore. So there are some things that have to give way about protecting the onshore investment. If that's where we become more agile and nimble to be able to add another 1 million barrel, 2 million barrel. For example, look at the Dangote refinery. People say, we give him 1 million barrel, give him 2 million barrel. I mean, so something that we have a copious amount under the ground, to give Dangote 1 million barrel has now become a big news. It's at 650,000 barrels per day capacity. Then give him 1 million barrel. That means even if it's run at half of capacity, that could be finished in 3 days. It means that we have to be productive on every front, the non-oil front, the oil front, and it's something that we have to be deliberate about over a longer period of time. That'll be my second point. The third thing I would say is also to think about the economy in the long term. I mean, we're doing things as if we are just reacting on the moment. And it's a way that someone who still, it's as if you have this Maslow hierarchy where you are still subsisting. So it's about, I'm living on a daily basis. We're living like we make money today, we spend today, we build road. We have to think. India, the US, major economies are making significant changes. Think 5, 10, 20 years, and they stay by heat. They dig their heels into heat. So in some sort of way, we have to figure out the way not just to be reaction, what we can do, shining road that we can build, shining streets of light we can put down there. what does this become of this economy in another 10, 20 years? If we want to become the leading agricultural producer for the world, what does that mean that we have to start different? Which agricultural produce? Brazil exports $125 billion agri-produce. If that's where we want to play, if it's solid minerals we want to play, we have to sit back and look at how do we optimize value within that sector. So there are some decisions that it's not a Bola Tinubu administration. It's something that is similar to that is the Lekki Free Trade Zone, which Dangote now finally plugged into. Started from Bola Tinubu's administration. Now is when you are seeing the fruition that 12, maybe 16 years down the line. For us to be able to do anything significant, we need to think much more long term, not just about what will get you to win the next election. Thanks.
Thank you so much. I'll just ask both of you to make these comments, then I'll hand over to Pastor Sonny and Jumoke to take questions from the floor. And this is this administration that we have right now. I think your reference to Bola Tinubu administration in Lagos State that led to benefits of free trade zone about almost 20 years later or 12 years later. Is it clear what the vision of this administration is? What are they really, where are they taking Nigeria to? And is there a clear line of sight to how to get there? Dr. Yusuf, you first, and then Olusegun can give us his own comments.
Yes, in terms of clarity of policy direction, I think there is some clarity. Clarity, especially from the point of view of some of the reforms that have been initiated. But how to drive the reforms to achieve the outcomes is a different thing. We know the damage that the foreign exchange policy regime of the Buhari administration did to the economy in terms of the first loss of revenue, which runs into close to 7 trillion annually, the corruption, the round tripping, the lack of transparency. And I mean, it was an open secret, even within the banking system, where you have to bribe and do all sorts of things before you can get foreign exchange allocated. So the infusion of a market approach, perhaps a limited market approach, I should say, into the policy process, for me, I think it's a major step forward and it's a pointer in the right direction. It is good for revenue and it is good for investment. It is good for transparency. Where we should be concerning these things, certainly not. But in terms of direction, I believe that is the way to go. Of course, you can fine-tune it. We are seeing some fallouts of some of these policies because sometimes, again, this is economics. Economics is it's a social science. It's not an exact science. So you cannot accurately predict outcomes sometimes. But in terms of general direction of policy, I think as far as our forex policy, our forex is very critical because it's at the heart of investment. It's at the heart of the flow of capital in and out of the country. So to that extent, I think we are in the right direction. The same thing with the fuel and oil and gas sector. The oil and gas sector could have given us the kind of advantage it gave to countries like the UAE if you have had the leaders that had the right kind of commitment. And if you had the bureaucracy, because the bureaucracy had done a lot of damage. Because so many terrible things have been entrenched in the bureaucracy. So that everybody within the bureaucracy is looking for what is in need for him or her. That is the culture, and it will take some time to remove that. So what the government is trying to do, trying to open up the space for more private sector participation, because for our kind of economy and for the quality of both the political class and the bureaucracy, the less influence they have on what is happening, the better. so that we expand the costs for the private sector and reduce the scope for the public sector. Perhaps just restrict them to issues of defense, security, and some critical infrastructure, so that we allow the private sector, to move with the rest of the economy. And we see what our private sector people are doing. In spite of all the challenges, they are doing incredible things, including the younger generation. So it's a question of removing the barriers, and with some of the appointments that the government has made, I think, particularly in the ICT area, I think it's something that is good. Then electricity, we know what it is when we have this over concentration of the power supply on the national grid, a population of 200 million people relying on a single grid, so that if something just trips Shogbo, the whole country will go into darkness. So the proposal to decentralize that is also a very good thing. So in terms of general policy direction, I think we're on the right path, but we need to connect those policies to proper implementation. So I think that is where a lot of
yeah. I think I want to make my point quickly. Someone has to be muted.
But this is really food that's for guys. You don't block the
we are going to mute everyone and then ask you to please unmute again.
Who is on techno?
Just go back and do it.
Okay, so I said on policy side, I mean, the right things have been done, but I have a different view. It's a bit from Dr. Mush, that I feel two things were done at the same time, and I don't think the two should have been handled the same way at the same time, because we are like in a loop now. So we have removed fuel subsidy, which has to go, because we can obviously not pay for subsidy again. But we have also tried to liberalize the FX regime, and we're seeing that the currency is losing value. Devaluation is happening. We are 1,340 or something around that today already, and which means that the cost of importing crude will keep increasing. If we have to continue that way, we are going to lie to ourselves if we think that government is not paying subsidy at this point. There is no mathematics of importing crude at 1,900 naira per 1,900 naira to $1, and you're going to sell crude and you're going to sell the pump pipe at 650 naira. That mathematics is not hard enough. So it's something that it looks like we have done two things at the same time without not being mindful that one would have a significant effect on the other. Maybe when Dangote's refinery comes on stream, then we can now say, okay, we'll localize this transaction. But let's not forget that we will have also a major FX exchange earning will be short-circuited in that process, because we can. Alhaji would definitely not buy crude in dollars. It would be when we source for the dollars, it's sourcing for the dollars internally as well. So it's the only other option is to extend production. There's no other option beyond that. So because if you don't extend production, whatever we have right now is not optimized as it should be. So I felt like enough thoughtfulness. I like the removal of subsidy. I think that should have gone. I would have advocated for a small window that we could manage for the FX importers, maybe. But we know how Nigerians, even if you want to manage that, because of a lack of consequence culture that we have built, it still means that no matter how much you ring fence a system for them, certain producers, it gets abused in the head. But I just feel like we've done two things at the same time, and they're still spiraling out of control, because the retail price of pump is not 650 naira, it's over 1,000 naira. And definitely it means that NNPC or government is still being shortchanged at one point or the other in the peak manner. I feel like the intention to draw us back to macroeconomic stability is fine. I like it. I just should that the level of opacity that went in the last government, where we now we took a $3.3 billion deal for FX, and the terms were really, really ridiculous. Around 12%. Transaction cost is taking it somewhere around 15%. When Ghana did the same cocoa deal and did it for 8%, and then there's no FX problem that we are in. Ghana is not far worse than us. So I don't understand how we have come so desperate. We're taking World Bank loans. We're almost at the highest, I think we're the third largest recipient of World Bank loans at the IB, the IDA loans at this point. I mean, so and that store will also close at some point. So there's nothing that would replace us thinking, how are we going to end FX and are we going to be a productive country that sells to the world? If it's garments, if it's agriculture, if it's services, whatever it has to be, the government has to sit down, which is something that has to be urgent now, to craft a medium to short-term to long-term strategy, how we are going to be a country that sells to the world. Everybody's talking about future-proof, China proofing the world economy, if you allow me to use that word, which means the global supplies are really concentrated within a single region. If this is a time for us to get our efficiencies together and be able to plug into that economy, yes, we should do everything possible in the 3 to 4 years so that even if it's 5% of China's manufacturing capabilities we can take in, yes, then we can at least change our story in that regard to some extent. So I feel that's something that we have to put on the table. But I think in terms of direction, the only part I still struggle with this government heavily is fiscal discipline. If you're not showing, and I think with this we're cutting retinue of aides that are traveling, if you're not showing that you have a grip on your budget, on your procurement, on your spending, and you're asking people to squeeze themselves out, it's just hypocritical and it will not just add up at the end of the day. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sonny, Jumoke, please, let's do questions, maybe two questions each, conclusion, so that we can try and finish on time. We've run out of time, really. We really want to try and end ALG at 6:30 this year and be consistent with that if we can. So over to you quickly.
Thank you, sir. Pastor Sonny, I don't know if you have any questions before we open it up. So good evening, everyone. We'll be taking the 3 hands up. As Mr. President has said, we're trying to manage time better. Yes, Amaji, I had seen that your hand was up. So we'll take 2 questions and then we'll have you answer them together, if you don't mind. So if you could keep your questions very short and to the point, we would appreciate that. Can we have Mr. Folabi ask your question, and then we'll have Auntie Fumi. Please go ahead.
Please let's know who you are directing your question to. Okay, except if you just anybody.
Good afternoon, everybody, and happy New Year.
Jumoke, can I also ask question?
Okay, Uncle Bashir, we'll defer to you. It's your special guest. Thank you. Those will be the last. Go ahead, Uncle Falabi.
My question is, what are your thoughts on so many multinational companies leaving Nigeria? And how do you think it was going to affect the Nigerian economy? And my second question is very simple. You said earlier, we must limit our exposure to foreign exchange. How do you anticipate we limit or we control our excessive exposure to foreign exchange? Thank you very much.
Who did you direct those questions to, Uncle Falabi?
Prof.
Okay, thank you. So can we have Mrs. Tomori ask your questions, please?
Good evening, all. Happy New Year. I'm so delighted about these 2 speakers. They have touched on many issues that are relevant. But I want to ask a question. Is our budgetary process and system so porous to allow so much leakages for over 50 years? If so, how do we stem the leakages? Number 2, I have a belief that people just think budget is a means, is an end in itself, instead of it being a means to an end. It's a tool for development. If you are just reckless about your expenditure, you can never have development. Number 3, in all your presentation and things, the point is that we need competent hands who will be able to fashion good policies and also good implementation. Let me remind this House, the mess we are in today have been created over a period of 50 years. Value added, foreign exchange management, so many things. We all laughed and cheered. The dollar was 4 naira. It went to 22. It went to 80. It went to 150. And we kept on spending. UAE invested. India invested. Singapore was developing. Here we are today. We are just promoting poverty. How do we turn things, as both speakers have said, it's not going to be easy, but it's going to be very, very tough. All the errors of the past 50 years, how we turn it right overhand. And then, when we are talking of competent hands, it means elections have consequences. So please note, especially all those under 60, guard your loins and salvage this country. Thank you.
Thank you, Ma. Can we add one more question to that? I believe Auntie's comments were more comments than questions. Can we have Honorable Ashiru please ask his question? And if we could have you take all three together. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you very much. Happy New Year, everybody. Mine is more of another contribution than questions. My brother, Dr. Muda, spoke extensively. But the problem we have, which we never focused on, is the fact that Nigeria were known to be very versatile in terms of agriculture in the olden days. For example, you have Mexico. Mexico, they are the major agricultural supplier to the United States of America. But we've even jettisoned that. We are focusing on, we should be looking at agriculture that will lead into industrialization in Nigeria. And we should start having agro-processing centers. That's the only way forward. The issue of refineries that Dangote starting this, I have bad news for you that it won't change the price of fuel. Don't forget that the cost of production will be high. Aliko Tree is borrowing money offshore, foreign exchange. You have to pay back the money. So we shouldn't see that. Then the final thing I want to say, which is the fact that when government come in, we praise them because they get the best. I mean, look at the ministers. We have some best crop of people there. But the problem is we have these people, we call them the landlady. From my own experience in government, landlords and landlady. The civil servants, they have problems. Recently, they've arrested, all the accountant general of this country have been arrested and they've been seeing billions of naira in their hands. What's going on? So I think there's a problem that even President Tinubu will do his best, but we need to reform the civil service. It's very important. We need to look at that. And it's not that we don't have clarity of purpose, you don't have the clarity of purpose. The problem is that the implementation, how do we implement it? Who are people driving it? And that is the problem. Look at the little, under 7 months, look at the kind of things. And our ministers, they earn less than 1 million naira. But the number of escort vehicles, securities around them, if you look at the cost to government per minister, it can be less than 100 million naira in a year, or 150 million. So we need to be sincere with ourselves as a country, and we must be ready to sacrifice and have sincerity of purpose. That's my contribution. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. If I could have Dr. Muda take Ogulafalabi's question, which is on the multinational groups leaving Nigeria and how do we limit our exposure to foreign exchange, and then maybe she can contribute to some of the comments, and then we'll take the last two set of questions. So go ahead, Dr. Muda.
Now, for the multinationals, there are a number of dimensions to it. First is that the multinationals have high foreign exchange exposure. They have exposure in terms of the owners of the business who are looking up to returns in dollars. They have exposure in terms of the importation of their raw materials and inputs. They have exposure in terms of credit facility that they source from abroad. So if you take all of that together and you see what is happening to the exchange rate, the dollar value in terms of returns on investments to the owners of this business has become peanuts. And because they are multinationals, by the time they compare what they get here with what is happening in other parts of the world, they feel that this is not a place to be. You know, then a lot of them also have taken money from their parent companies in dollars. Now they are generating their revenue in naira. How will they pay back? So even in the books of even those that are already here, I mean, we saw the kind of terrible impact it had on their balance sheets. Heavy losses because of the exchange rate revaluation. So that, for me, has been a major issue. Then we have an industrialization strategy which is also defective. If you have an industrialization strategy that is heavily import dependent, it needs a strong currency to sustain it. Once you have a weak currency, it becomes unsustainable. That is why we agree with Otumba Ashiru on this issue of agro-allied industries and so on and so forth, oil and gas, gas-based industries. You know, we should have been looking at what you call resource-based industrialization. You have industries today that are importing almost 80% of their inputs, raw materials. With the current foreign exchange, how can they survive? How can they cope? So that is a defective policy, which I think it will take some time to correct. Then finally, the current situation requires some flexibility in terms of business model. The multinationals are so big, they are not that nimble. They have a very rigid, business model that you cannot quickly adjust to the changing dynamics of the market, the way maybe a Nigerian company will do, or some of these Chinese, or even some SMEs. So ability to adjust business model to make it flexible is much more difficult. Because for some of those multinationals, the product that they produce, a lot of competitors have swept their market share away. Some of them even producing here in Nigeria, So for me, I think those are the issues with the multinationals. Then, of course, the limiting exposure to Forex, I think it's about import substitution. For instance, we spend a lot for people who send their children to abroad for education, for medical care, imported raw materials. I think we should look across the range of all these things that is costing us foreign exchange and see how we can source some of these things locally, how we can localize it. We already have some very good tertiary institutions, some very good, secondary schools here, that some of them have international standards and so on. Those are opportunities for them. The same thing with medicals. I mean, people go abroad for malaria, for headache, and all sorts of things. But with what is happening with the foreign exchange, I mean, we have some hospitals that are up and coming. But again, the government needs to support them to be able to raise their standards so that we can localize all this expenditure. The same thing with vacations. People go for summer here and there. I mean, you can look for alternatives locally. So that is the point I'm making there. Then, of course, the biggest in terms of this exposure is the importation of petroleum products. We are spending almost 30% of our forex importing petroleum products. If we're able to localize that as much as possible, that's also limiting our exposure to foreign exchange. So those are my responses to that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Seun, I'll have you add your comments. Do you have any comments to add to this first set of questions before we take the next one?
Yeah, I think our budget is too porous. How do we stem it? And I think it's a political culture. It's our political culture that is making the whole budget process defective. I mean, there was a time, the Obasanjo period, they had a due process office, or they had a budget intelligence unit right inside the presidency that was aided by Mrs. Obi Ezekwesili before that was collapsed into the Bureau of Public Procurement and all of that. There was a bit of control. So it's just whatever we see, either the aloofness of President Buhari, or either somehow, maybe the over culture of President Tinubu. it just speaks clearly that it is a fundamental challenge with the political culture. And people see that signaling. I mean, look at the 3 billion naira that was spent on registration of voters of, like I said, of this register, and that money just fizzled away, through different pipelines of organizations. So there's something that has to change. And if something has to change, our budget needs to change. We can try so hard, but one, political culture has to be redefined to be premised on service. Which comes to the third question: how do we get competent hands? How do we get more people to understand that election would have consequences? Also, our democracy. Our democracy also there has to be question about, and which is what Dr. Yusuf mentioned. There's really a big interrogation of our democratic culture, because it looks like we've not been able to divulge our, divorce our culture from, this whole, I must live big, I must be seen, and I must drive big cars. We don't really know how to divorce it from the fact that public service is service. It's not a place to go and earn largesse and aggrandize yourself. So, some sort of way, we also need to have a huge conversation on the expectation of the electorate, on the people who are in public office. It's something which is really broken. And it comes to say the budget has to be a tool for development. You said it all. If it's not a tool problem for development, if it's like a contract vending machine, people just put items in the budget, because this is what happens once the budget is passed, procurement begins. And for most ministries, rather than set priorities to say, this is the priority project for this ministry, they do procurement across all the projects. They begin progress across all the projects. So even if the finance tells them you only have 2 billion for this quarter, you find out that they will prefer to put that 2 billion in 20 places and 20 million naira, put them and give everybody an award letter. And so the project, so you are giving 10% mobilization fee. And before you might get another tranche of the money, you might have to wait maybe the third quarter of the year, and maybe you now get 40% this year, and the project is getting more expensive to execute. We have over 19,000 uncompleted projects in Nigeria, that are in various stages of. So there has to be questions, serious questions about, some of this decision making that we have made. I think I will stop at that point. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. So we're going to take the last 3 sets of questions, and unfortunately, because of time, we won't be able to take any more hands. So we would have Amaji Christian, we would have architect Naya Etok, and Said, also Said Adeleye asked their question. So Mr. Christian, please go ahead with your question. If you can keep it very succinct, we would appreciate that.
Okay, good evening all. Thank you so much, Dr. Mahmood and Mr. Olusheyin. Okay, my question goes to Dr. Mudu. My question is this: during the Christmas period, there was a little bit of palliative the government released for transport for Christmas period. I began to wonder, why is it that the government continued to throw money around without proper planning and structuring, which continue to affect our budgeting? Because those money that was released during the Christmas period came one way or the other from the budget. So my question goes like this: what can we do to control our funding, our spending? Then that is number one. Then number two goes in the area of project tracking. Most times the project continues to be repeated project over time. Every administration comes up with the same project, and this is duration of 4 years, a maximum of 8 years. Can't there be an institution designed for project tracking, that every administration, for any project that must be executed by any administration, those institutions will scrutinize to really know if those projects has been done or they are new projects? That's my question.
Thank you, Christian. May I have Dr. Bashir Kofi, please? Uncle Bashir, apologies, I missed you. So please go ahead with your question.
Yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate the intervention of Dr. Muda Yusuf and Sheon, whom I always appreciate. I enjoy listening to them. And I say hi to Pastor and my dear Jumuke. So now the issue, I don't think sometimes we have to go beyond the economic arithmetic. of the budgeting. But what is also very important, you can have beautiful budget, you can have even funds within the country, but if you don't have people who genuinely love their country, who genuinely want to have stability in the country, now how could you have any positive change in the implementation of the budget? And I think we have to start thinking of alternative to budget finance. Now, this alternative, which I'm thinking, is that, you see, why don't you do what the MDS did in Saudi Arabia? Now, even though we take the Saudi Arabia is a monarchy, as we know, but the MDS, that is Salman, when he came as crown prince, he realized that about 400 Saudi princes have over $1 trillion. So he called a meeting. He said that all those princes should come for a meeting with the king, Salman, in Ritz-Carlton Hotel in Riyadh. And when they were in the hotel, the hotel was surrounded by security forces. And he entered and told them everybody must contribute certain amount. And I think they raised about $2 trillion. Now, I think what should be done to Nigeria, we know people who have looted the Nigerian state. And we know the disaster of Buhari government for 8 years. And we know those actors who did that. And they are working in Nigeria. And it's only in Nigeria that you have private people richer than government. This cannot be possible in any serious system. So I think my suggestion, and I would want the opinion of the speakers, why don't you make this kind of alternative to budget financing? Because any short of that, you will have a problem, because the same crooks who are in government now, they are the ones who are going to run your budget. And I'm not too sure whether they even have the competence. So I think if the government, because I think it was shown, he talked about that you have to create a situation where people will have confidence of this regime. How could you have confidence of any regime while you remember just a few days ago, they have this, they have this launching of Buhari's book. This is with the record of what they have done to the economy. And you have something to celebrate on the leader of the regime who have destroyed the Nigerian state? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We'll take the last two questions. We'll have Architect Etok and then Said. Thank you.
Okay. Oh, thanks so much for having me. Pastor, as always, very relevant topic, very awesome discussant or resource persons. Now, I want the two speakers to either agree or disagree with me, and my position is this. Number one, the way we can have the dollar not flog us the way we are doing is for us to shut down the demands on the dollar. As a result, would you agree with me that government should do two things? Number one, go on a low profile, regime. And number two, shut in the country for 1 year so that we will look at ourselves in the face and tell us that desperate times need desperate measures, so that again, we will be able to cut down on the demands that have put so much pressure on the dollar. And on account of that, start to reinvent ourselves and go on what makes sense. So do the speakers agree with me that we should go low profile and that we should shut in? That's number one. Finally, I want to appeal, please get into politics. Politics is not a dirty game. We will always be saying all these things until we that are talking, if we are honest and we mean well, get in there. It might be tasking, it might be difficult, but it's not impossible. Many of us are trying it. Please get into politics. I beseech you by the mercies of God. Thank you, and God bless everybody.
Thank you very much, sir. Saeed, that would be the last question, and then we'll have the speakers respond. Please go ahead, Saeed.
Okay, thank you very much, and greetings to everyone. Special shout out, of course, to the team behind us. As I like to always say, we know the issues of our country, and as summarized by Madam Fumi earlier stated, competence and accountability is all we need to make the difference. However, being more solution-oriented, I would like the speakers to help identify. If we have to narrow our focus to state levels, as Sean rightly said, there are states that actually generate their own internal revenue. And we can actually start focusing on perhaps synergy to help improve those states. So my question will be, of all the states, without, of course, neglect to the need for transparency and accountability and competence, what 3 states would you identify as top Nigerian states right now that seems to be on that trajectory? That could be an example for other states and by default, the federal government itself. And this would be, for the diaspora network, in particular, to identify alliance and maybe through individuals like yourself to see how we can help improve the quality of performances in those states that could become a model, not just for the country as a whole, but even younger generations to see that things are possible. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So can we have the speakers? Who wants to go first? Dr. Muda, do you want to go first, or Seun, do you want to go first? And in addressing that, if you could just also include your closing remarks once you address those questions and comments, would appreciate that.
All right. I will yield most of these questions to Seun. The question from Christian concerning the issue of palliatives and the fiscal issues. The comment from Alhaji Bashir Kofi and the issue of the focus on states. I leave that to Seun. He has done a lot of work in all those areas. Then concerning the proposal by architect Etok, well, this is a very radical proposition. I wish it is as easy as he has said it. But I take the point that we need to do a lot more to, refocus the country, to rely less on imports. And let me say even that the very fact of the depreciation of the currency itself is even discouraging a lot of imports already. But I don't think that going to the extreme of completely shutting down the country, our doors and all of that, I don't think that will be practicable, especially under a democratic dispensation. And in any case, there is no country that is an island. We need 1 or 2 things, from other countries to support even our production activities. We want to produce, we want to add value, you don't have all those resources within. So those will be my comments. I will yield the rest to Seun. And on my closing remarks, well, it has been a very rewarding, a very good experience for me. I want to express my appreciation to Pastor Itua and the team that have put this together for giving me the opportunity to share my thoughts on this in this conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. I'm sure we'll also be getting in touch with you to see how we can collaborate on national issues. Seun, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I'll take the question, so pushed it to me. On the palliative, I mean, it's typical of us. We have a huge problem around identity systems, and it's something we have to figure out. And until we figure out identity systems, we'll keep spending a lot of money trying to do too many things. I mean, the Buhari government spent at least 800 billion on social investment programs over the 8-year period. I'm even being generous with that figure. It's clear that if we don't properly target people because we have extensive data about them, then we can't get the kind of results we want. So my charge is just that we have to, the NIC can't just be capturing people's data. We have to figure out a way to link that to income, to bank accounts, to link that to some form of metric to know how we can properly intervene and help people. In the US, I move around between the US and Nigeria a lot. If the government says primary school teachers in this local government, either private or public, should get some money, they will get it. People within this income band should get some money based on filed taxes. The check will be in their mailbox the next morning. So just because of proper profiling that they have had of the citizens. So that's something we have to figure out as we go along the way. Unless we do that, we always think our money is a problem. We don't have a money problem in code. We have a planning problem. And until we properly plan before we spend the money, it's as we just pouring money in a basket. Comes to your second question around tracking. Yes, it's also part of project development to plan to track performance. And tracking performance is not just in classrooms. Classroom, we build classrooms. We're no hospitals, we build hospitals. What classroom supposed to deliver? Improve quality of learning. So it's just the same thing. We don't focus on data, we don't focus on planning. If I'm building classrooms, I'm fixing an infrastructure gap, I'm looking at numeracy skills, I'm looking at literacy skills. I'm thinking that what is all of this old infrastructure supposed to change? Am I training the teachers? And so there's an holistic thinking that has to come into all of these things when we want to plan and when we want to measure. So when I look at project tracking, I'm just saying, government said they will do X, they will do Y. If they do the X and Y, what exactly is the impact of all of that in the society? Because these are the things we fail to do. You see, Jigawa and Kano, and there was a time in the north, everybody was building these massive ICT institutes in the early, Samino Turaki and the rest. What became all of those things? Because also people were not critical to reflect that there has to be a pipeline that has to be fed at the primary and the secondary school level before you now end up building ICT institute. So those places grow up with, becomes wasteful government projects at the end of the day. Same way we are building airports and we're not asking ourselves, is the air cargo the efficient way of export? When we have next to nothing cost when we are shipping around the world. So that's my own point. So we have to plan, we have to track, we also have to track meaningfully. And I think you can join us. We have a platform called Tracker. You can follow us on Tracker NG. And you can join one of what we call the community champions and track public projects with us. We're part of our conversations with the Minister of Budget and Planning is how do they take in all of our Tracker. I will put a link in the chat, in the email in there, and you can also email me personally in case you need some directions about that. So that would help us if you want to be part of public project tracking. We call them community champions. They help us in tracking projects at all levels. The focus of state is critical because we look at this federal government too much. And it's just because the data quality we have at state is weak. So at least at the federal level, you can see budgets, you can see spending data based on some websites that we built and some data that we captured. But the state level, it's like a big hole. Nobody's dark hole, definitely. Nobody's saying enough. We need to advocate for more data supply. And the states are now getting more money. States that used to get 4 billion naira in monthly FAC allocation are now getting around close to 10 billion naira because of this whole new devaluation of currency, and they're getting more money. So we need to pay more extra attention to states. And it's very simple to get. We have a website, and I'll put the website there. It's also about us spending, if we spend 2 hours of curiosity, we can get the state budget on this website. We can get the budget performance reports on this website and start beginning to distill it, analyze it, and begin to bring the insights out. And we just need somebody talking. We just need to group ourselves into 3-5 estate associations, village development associations, community, and be able to talk about these issues, because leaving it alone for civil society or activists and co to talk about them is never a sustainable way to do things. I will leave it at that, and I would just want to thank Pastor Etu and the entire team for inviting me. Let me be very honest, this has been a great opportunity to share more about the work. And I will just say that Nigeria needs quality leaders. It needs leaders who are service-oriented, and it needs also to rethink, to have an honest conversation about its current architecture. It's highly defective, and until we are able to have those conversations about what we achieve in the short term, the value system we are going to exude, and all of that, I think we would try, but it's not just going to add up as a whole. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Well,
go ahead.
Go ahead, Jumoke. Yeah.
No, I wanted to hand over to you and then ask when you want us to make the announcements.
I think you can just go ahead and make the announcements now, and then I can just conclude.
Okay. So if we can have Sister Shade come up, please. Mrs. Fafidemi, if you can come up with your announcements, and we have a couple more. Take it from there. Okay. While we're waiting for her, I also want to announce that we have launched the Ito Olajide Ighodalo Mentorship Program, Real Ethical Accountable Leadership Mentorship Program. And so our first pilot program has just kicked off. So we're very excited about that. I want to also thank Chamberlain Peterside, who is here. He's one of our mentors. And those of you that have signed up for that, our first cohort has about 17 mentees right now. And so we'll be giving you updates about that leadership program, that mentorship program. It's to the point of what most of you have stated here about really getting involved in good governance and educating ourselves on our roles and responsibilities in advancing the nation. So thank you to all those that have signed up to be mentors in this program. We're really excited about it. And also we have project management course that we've also rolled out. We had our first cohort, and we'll be rolling out another session in February. Sheun did mention something about planning. And if we do apply the principles of project management to everything we do, maybe we would have better outcomes. So we'll also be training a lot of, especially the youth, on project management fundamentals. Is a 6 weeks program. So those are part of the things that we're doing. We also have the Citizens Responsibility Campaign. We had our first session last August, and we graduated a group, but we want to take this more to the grassroots. And so we'll be looking to work with those of you that are in that space to help move this and really get to the grassroots. If I can, is Sister Shade ready? Are you available now? Okay.
Yes. Thank you very much, ALG family. As you know, welcome back, everybody. So thank you so much for joining us with full force this first broadcast of the year. Now, if you remember, we closed the year giving an account of all the things that you can look forward to that we have on the burner. So this year, we've spent the first 3 years building our roots and getting our foundation in place and making sure that there's enough messaging out there to say that we really mean business. So as we move into our 4th year of operation, we need to grow our capacity. So our capacity is required to be funded. You know, everywhere you go, they tell you to plan. So as an ALG organization, we're not just going to be talking about all the things that need to be done, but we're going to have to put boots on the ground. And you cannot put boots on the ground without adequate funding. So on that, with that premise, we would like to invite partnerships to come from the floor. Some came in to just participate, to be on the NLS. Some came in to give us great ideas. Professor Grange talked about all the different things, and we've made so much progress. However, we are now at a crucial stage where we just need for everybody who feels a part of this ALG family to contribute their own widow's mite. So we're inviting right now for all our members, registered members, viewers, people who will participate in one way or the other, or utilize our resources, especially on the YouTube channel, that can we ask that everybody who feels a sense of belonging to the ALG family make up their mind in 2024 to commit something, no matter how small, even if it is just 2,000 naira, if it is $5, $10, $20, if it's 100 rand, if it is 5,000 naira every month, if we have a pool of 300 people doing that kind of contribution, we'll have enough to get our back office going smoothly and effectively. We'll be more effective. We've survived the whole of last year based on funding coming from the close community, and we're very grateful to that. We survived also based on income coming in from our directors' pool of funds, and we're very grateful for that. However, going forward, we need that commitment. Talk can be cheap, and we've been blessed with this platform that allows all of us to come in, bring our ideas, and vent, because it's healthy when you're able to even have a community that listens, where your voice can be heard. It reduces your tension and it gives you hope. So as we come for hope, let's all contribute our quota. You may not be able to do much in terms of bringing your skills on board, like some are already doing. But 5,000 naira every month, that'll be great. It'll go very far. And then after that, we'll be able to move into getting the community social investments organizations to give us part of their quota for the year. We're trying to raise funds, and believe it or not, at this point, our YouTube channel has been monetized. So we spent a lot of energy trying to get us to a point where we can be on the receiving end to large-scale funding. So it doesn't have to be formalized funding. You don't have to disclose who you are. You just simply need to go onto YouTube, watch the next program that you want to watch, and click the thanks button. We have a thanks button with the $sign on it that allows you to be able to just give us as much as anything from, I think, round about $5 or $1, and it just keeps scaling. So you can do it repeatedly if you want in one month, or you can just do it once a month. If you have access to pay gates, especially for those who are in diaspora. Those who are in the local environment may continue to pay in Naira if that is a whole lot more convenient. But those who are in diaspora, just use your Visa cards, use your MasterCards, and just do a quick click. You pull up the thanks button under every video, any video whatsoever, and you pull out the bar and choose what you want to pay. So you'll see that you have the ability to pay as much as maybe $50 at a time, or even more if you require. So that is the commitment we're looking forward to from all of you. And I tell you, it's good value for money. We're calculating some of the interventions that we're looking forward to doing this year, and we can see that we can easily have impact on the entire nation at income per capita of 1 rand 10 cents per person. Where do you get that? It's not everywhere. So we're choosing our interventions very carefully in such a way that we can say, at the end of the day, our impact is measurable. There's so many things we will do that will touch the entire nation directly or indirectly. While there's some things that will be used for, some of our funding will be used strictly for the youth community, some will be used for women interventions, some will be used, but most of our money that will be collected will be used at the grassroots level, where we're able to do the measurements and assessments of what the local governments need. Now, based on that, we'll easily be able to pull in capital funds from left, right, and center, globally, locally, in Jesus' name. So let's ask you to do your part. We are mighty grateful for how far we've come. Please walk this next mile with us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And if I just wanted to add to that, thank you to everyone that has already been contributing to ALG. We have a few people that have been consistently giving every month. We thank you. We thank you for our large donors as well. And we would also have a report of our finances once we publish our year-end report. And also the projects want to thank everyone that contributed to some of the initiatives that we came up with. Those were direct contribution. And as Shade said, as we go through the year, once those projects and initiatives are already outlined and approved by the board of directors, we will be presenting it to you for an opportunity for you to support and partner on specific initiatives or on ALG in general. So we would hear from Mr. President. He would be launching that fundraising initiative when the time comes. So thank you, everyone. We'll publish our financial records. It's open book. I think we said that earlier on. So thank you. Go ahead, sir.
All right. Thank you very much, Jumoke. God bless you, Sonny. Thank you very much. And all those who have with us today. Let me thank very, very profoundly Dr. Muda Yusuf. Excellent job, excellent review. Very frank, very forthright. Also, Oluseun Winigbide of Budget. Thank you so much for those very, very enchanting opinions that you have. And people like you and Dr. Yusuf make me continue to have hope in this great and wonderful country. Before we go, let's just commiserate with the government of Oyo State, Governor Seyi Makinde and his people, especially those who lost loved ones in that very tragic, unfortunate, and sudden and probably really, really unnecessary incident in Ibadan. In fact, that thing happened not too far from my own family home. But thankfully, nothing adverse happened to us or anyone there. But a few people lost their lives and many, many are injured. Let's say a prayer for them. And let's also have a minute or a few seconds in silence for those who lost their lives. May the Almighty continue to stretch forth his hands of comfort, grace, and love unto their families in the name of Jesus Christ. May God continue to show us mercy in Nigeria. Wherever this carelessness came from, may Lord show us mercy. May we not lose assets, property, and lives anymore from any incidents of this sort. And may God grant strength, grace, and fortitude for the families to bear these irreparable losses. And God comfort the government of Oyo State in particular and Nigeria in general. Governor Makinde and of course President Bola Tinubu. In Jesus' name we have prayed.
Amen.
Amen. May God bless all of us. May we have a very thoroughly good new year in spite of everything. And we pray and look forward to a truly, truly outstanding year and a great economy in Jesus' name. God bless you.
And Chinola, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate your presence here.
I think we should have.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Pastor.